Chapter 3843. When Yuan woke up in the hospital, it was already 3 days later. Her surroundings were white, and her nose was filled with the smell of disinfectant. She blinked her eyes and felt pain all over her body. The pain in her muscles told her that she might have been lying there for a long time. But despite the pain, she instinctively moved her hand to her abdomen. The child was still there. She closed her eyes, and a tear slid down the corner of her eye, dripping down. She was very afraid. Before she fainted, she was very afraid when she fell into a deep sleep. She felt that she had a very, very long dream. In the dream, she had been staying in a quiet place alone. It was very safe there, and she had been there the whole time. But then, she heard Xiangnan calling for his mother. Xiangnan couldn't find her and was very anxious, so she woke up. She was still alive. She lay quietly, and then one of her hands was held by a warm hand. Then, it was Yimubai's extremely hoarse voice. "Wen Yuan, you're awake?" Wen Yuan's body froze, and her hand was also struggling slightly. It was very weak, but he could feel it. Yimubai's voice was hoarse. "Wen Yuan, I'm back." He stroked her forehead and pushed her hair aside. He wanted to kiss her, but her expression was that of rejection, even though her eyes were closed. She refused to open her eyes to look at him. "I'll call the doctor." His breath fell on her neck, and then he spoke in a low voice. Wen Yuan didn't say anything, and her eyelashes trembled slightly. He knew that she was awake, and he also knew that she was awake. Because she was awake, she didn't want to face him. In the end, he still kissed her lips. It was a little cold, not as warm as before. A trace of pain flashed through Yimubai's eyes, and he slowly left. He wanted to kiss her fiercely and shatter her coldness, but he was timid. Yimubai, actually felt timid in front of Wen Yuan one day. When the kiss ended, her fingers were holding onto the bedsheets. He saw it and watched silently. Then, he slowly left her body, and his fingers gently touched her hand. He raised his eyes and held back the tears that were about to fall from the corners of his eyes. He quickly went out to call the doctor. What followed was a busy morning with all kinds of tests. Yimubai accompanied Wen Yuan the whole time, but he almost didn't have the chance to talk to her, and she didn't want to talk to him either. After a busy morning, the doctor smiled and congratulated Yimubai. Both the adults and the child were fine. Finally, he left with the nurses. There were only the two of them in the ward, and it was eerily quiet. Wen Yuan leaned against the headboard and said very softly, "I want to eat some porridge." Hearing her voice, Yimubai's heart tightened. "I've already asked the auntie to make it. Suemo will bring it over later." As he spoke, his voice was almost choked with emotion. It seemed like he hadn't heard her speak for a long time. It seemed like he missed her. He wanted her to say a few more words, but he was afraid that she would tire herself out, and he was also afraid that she would reject him. In the end, he didn't say anything. Fortunately, Suemo came over with the porridge made by the auntie. Suemo put the porridge down and said softly, "I wanted to bring Xiangnan over, but I was afraid that he would be infected. Don't worry, he's very good at home, and he's very obedient. Annie takes good care of him, and I've been staying there for the past few days. Annie can't leave sometimes." Sumo's voice trembled as she spoke. She was a witness. She had witnessed the birth of a child from beginning to end, and she had seen the child almost die. At that time, when she saw the blood, she thought that the child would be lost. Chapter 3844. Wen Yuan looked at Suemo and smiled faintly. There was a hint of moisture in her eyes. Without Suemo, the child would be lost. The auntie panicked. She didn't say anything, but she remembered it. Suemo went over and held her hand. "Have some porridge?" Wen Yuan nodded. Then, Suemo was in a dilemma. Wen Yuan couldn't drink in her current condition. She could only feed her. If she fed her, Director Yi would be unhappy and it would be weird. Although Suemo felt bad, they were husband and wife. It wasn't appropriate for outsiders to say anything. So, she turned around stiffly. "I'm going out for a while." Then, she went out and saw Kong Xiao at the door. She stared at Kong Xiao and closed the door slowly. You heard that she woke up. Kong Xiao leaned against the opposite wall. He had long arms and legs. He only wore a gray sweater and a pair of khaki trousers. Suemo walked over. "She's fine. Do you want to see her? Not for the time being. Kong Xiao kicked his feet. I don't want to make things difficult for her. Although he didn't mean for it to happen, he couldn't get away from it. He felt sorry and guilty. He didn't think it was good for Wen Yuan to continue like this. But he also believed that Wen Yuan would stand up. She wouldn't be like this forever, because she was once the dazzling Wen Yuan, the one who dazzled everyone's eyes. Su Mo smiled and didn't say anything. Kong Xiao looked at her. Let's have a cup of coffee. Don't you think I'm small? She was still smiling. Kong Xiao lowered his eyes and looked at her. I'm not looking for a girlfriend. Who cares if you're big or small? Then he came over and hooked his arm around her neck. Su Mo understood that he was treating her as a man. Then she reached out to feel herself. She wasn't small and she wasn't a tomboy. Why couldn't he see the good in her? Why did he treat her as a man? However, Su Mo did not know how to dream. For men like Kong Xiao and Yimu Bai, perhaps Bai Shuli and Wen Yuan had the capital to dream, but Su Mo did not. She lived a tiring and difficult life every day. She felt like she was living like a dog that was about to die of exhaustion. Now that she had finally gotten a little better, she did not want to return to her original state just because of a little bit of affection. Not everyone was qualified to be Cinderella. She knew it too well. The ward became quiet again. Yimu Bai walked over to take the thermos and a beautiful bowl that Wen Yuan liked to use. He poured a bowl of water and sat by the bed. His voice was low and hoarse. I'll feed you. She looked down and put her fingers on her belly. He knew that she still didn't feel safe and was afraid of the baby. Wen Yuan didn't refuse because she was really weak. Wen Yuan didn't say anything. And of Mo of Yun, one Wen Yuan, of Mo and of one. Yimu Bai fed her patiently and carefully. Then he tidied up the food and looked at her. She had been lying in bed for a few days and had lost a lot of weight. Her wrist was so thin that it seemed like it would break at any time. Her face was so pale that it was almost transparent. It was heartbreaking to see her like this. For the past 2 days, Kong Xiao's words had been circling in his mind. He thought about a lot, but most of it was about how he treated her the other day and how he asked her not to contact Kong Xiao. Please remember the domain name of this book, Jiuqian Shenwang. Chapter 3845. What he had broken wasn't her connection with Kong Xiao. It was her dream. It was because he didn't love her enough that he treated her so cruelly. She was pregnant, holding the crystal piano in front of him. She had shattered it gently, but she had actually shattered herself. When he had insisted on looking for Qin Shun to save Lin Cece, she had been in so much pain. Had she given up all hope for him? He wanted to ask, but he didn't dare to. For the first time, he didn't want to face it. After Wen Yuan finished eating, he wanted to lie down. She slowly shifted herself to lie down and close her eyes. She felt his gaze on her. He wanted to talk to her, but she didn't know what to say to him. In their world, there was only the sound of shattering. It was broken, and there was nothing left. She wished that he had never said that he liked her, that he had never treated her well. That way, she wouldn't have been hurt so deeply. She had thought that she had gotten it before, but that day, she realized that she had never gotten it. The child, her, and Xiangnan were nothing in his heart. Her status as his wife seemed to be a joke now. He had left without hesitation. Reality was like a slap to Wen Yuan's face. It hurt so much. She had begged him to say that she wasn't feeling well, but he had felt that she was being stubborn. She smiled absent-mindedly and turned her head away. There were tears in the corner of her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. What was the point of crying? There was no point in crying in front of a man who didn't love you. Yimu Bai looked at her, his voice hoarse. Wen Yuan, can we talk? I don't want to talk, she said softly. He was silent for a while before she said, there's nothing else to talk about. Because he couldn't understand that kind of despair. She didn't want to experience it again after experiencing it once. If she was going to die one day, she hoped that it wouldn't be because of a man who didn't love her. After Wen Yuan said that, she closed her eyes and didn't want to talk anymore. Yimu Bai was still sitting next to her. He could only watch as she closed the door to her heart, but he couldn't do anything about it. At this moment, any further explanation would be futile. She fell asleep, and he stayed by her side. The ward regained its peace and tranquility. Yimu Bai sat there, gently caressing her face. She fell asleep and no longer resisted. He looked at her quietly, his eyes filled with heartache. After a long time, he tucked her in and walked to the window to look outside. The sky in New York was foggy. He remembered telling Wen Yuan that he would take her back to Be City to wait for her to give birth and for Xiangnan to recover. Now, in her heart, did she still want to be with him? Did she still want to return to Be City with him? What was she thinking? He didn't want to think, refused to think, that he had hurt her like this. In her eyes, he could no longer see the radiance of the past. He could no longer see the little star that Concho spoke of. When they first got together, he really saw it. He thought it was infatuation, but he didn't know that it was Wen Yuan using all his life to love her. She loved him. She loved him very much. But now he was confused. His fingers gently touched the cold glass, and he gently wrote her name. Wen Yuan, do you still love me? Will you still love me in the future? At this moment, he really wanted to go back to the past, to the time when they first met, to the time when they went on a blind date. He would choose to tell her that he liked her very much, and they would try to date and get married. He would marry her as soon as possible. Chapter 3846. He would make her pregnant and stay by her side without leaving her. Perhaps, back when he regained his memory, or that dark night, he would choose to be tolerant. He would choose to be friends with Kong Xiao. He would follow her when she met her old friend instead of being impatient. Or perhaps he would choose to stay when she said she wasn't feeling well that morning. There were so many people who could go to Qinshan, but he chose to go alone. In Wen Yuan's heart, his choice was between her and Lin Cece. He had missed too many times. He stood by the window for as long as she slept. He couldn't remember when he fell asleep. He only slept lightly when he couldn't take it anymore. Now that he was fine, he still couldn't fall asleep. He really wanted to talk to her and really wanted her to cry in his arms, but she didn't do anything. The more she acted like this, the more empty his heart felt. He asked himself if he loved her. In the past, it was vague, but now he thought he knew. Yi Mubai turned around, and his gaze fell on Wen Yuan's face. He stared at her, his eyes filled with reluctance. Just like that, their relationship was indifferent. Because Wen Yuan almost had a miscarriage, she stayed in the hospital for a whole month. Yi Mubai didn't do anything and stayed by her side for a month. She didn't let him go, but she still didn't talk to him much. She just liked to be in a daze. He wondered if she was thinking about the future, thinking about leaving him. Their relationship was very subtle. They were constantly linked because they had 2 children. If they didn't have children, she would have left him decisively. Yi Mubai thought. The day before Wen Yuan was discharged, Kong Xiao came over. Yi Mubai wasn't there. He didn't know if he deliberately avoided her or something. When Kong Xiao walked into the ward, Wen Yuan stood by the window in a daze. She was wearing a hospital gown. She was 5 months pregnant, but it looked empty. Her black hair reached her waist and scattered like seaweed. Kong Xiao remembered that the first time he saw Wen Yuan was because of her hair. Her hair was black and thick, the kind that could be used in advertisements. He looked at her quietly, and after a long time, he said in a hoarse voice, "You're discharged tomorrow?" Wen Yuan's body froze, as if she was a little shocked. Then she slowly turned her head. This was the first time they had met in months. Their eyes met and stared at each other for a long time. Then she smiled faintly. Kong Xiao. Kong Xiao looked at her carefully and finally confirmed that there were stars in her eyes. She was still the same as before. Wen Yuan was still Wen Yuan, and she did not fall down in a sorry state. He smiled back at her, the corners of his mouth lifted but trembled. He said 3 words silently. "I'm sorry." Wen Yuan shook his head. No, Concho doesn't need it. In her and Yi Mubai's emotional world, Kong Xiao never needed to apologize. It was all her fault. She was too persistent. It was her fault that she almost lost the child. Her tears almost fell. Concho stepped forward and helped her wipe them away. He loved her dearly and no longer restrained himself. He hugged her and carefully held her in his arms to comfort her. "It's okay, Wen Yuan." He loved her as if she was her brother, and he suppressed his feelings. Wen Yuan laughed and cried in his arms. "I know, I'm not afraid." She was just a little sad and upset. She didn't have any family by her side, and Kong Xiao was the only warmth she could rely on. She hugged the warmth that belonged to her, while Yi Mubai stood at the door of the ward. He looked at the smile on her face and the tears on her face. His whole body felt cold. Chapter 38:47. Yi Mubai just looked at Wen Yuan. He watched her cry and smile in front of others. But she wouldn't do that in front of him. His face became distorted because of extreme disappointment, and his fingers clenched into fists. He probably guessed what she was thinking and what she would think, but he wasn't willing to give up. He wanted to try to warm up her frozen heart again. Wen Yuan saw him, but she was still holding Kong Qiao. There was even a hint of provocation in her eyes. She was his wife, but she was holding Kong Qiao, the man he wasn't allowed to have a phone call with before. She was pushing him and testing his bottom line. Yi Mubai knew that. It wasn't that he didn't care, but he couldn't afford it. He looked at her quietly, and so did she. She probably felt that it was meaningless, so she let go of Kong Qiao. Thank you for being with me for so long. He didn't say it, but she knew that he had been in New York and attended a lot of events. Kong Qiao just smiled and said nothing. When he left, he looked at Yi Mubai and paused. In the end, he was in no position to say anything. Wen Yuan was still his wife. Kong Qiao wasn't a man who would take advantage of others. He hoped that Wen Yuan would make all the decisions by herself. Even if she was willing to continue the marriage, he would support her, but he believed that she wouldn't let herself live a miserable life. After Kong Qiao left, only Wen Yuan and Yi Mubai were left in the ward. He slowly closed the door and stood there for a while before saying in a low voice, "I just talked to the doctor. We can go home now. We just have to come for a prenatal checkup once a week." Wen Yuan sat on the sofa and said softly, "Got it." He went over and squatted beside her, saying in a low voice, "Wen Yuan, I'll be with you, okay? I'll always be with you." Wen Yuan's eyes slowly moved to his face, but she didn't say anything. Yi Mubai felt a stab of pain in his heart, but he just gently put his hand on her knee and whispered, "Wen Yuan, you don't even want to talk to me now?" She just looked at him, motionless. Yi Mubai's eyes flashed with pain. "Weren't you having a good chat with Kong Qiao just now?" This time, when Yuan spoke to him, she had a faint smile on her face, a smile that he wished he could treasure. His voice was hoarse. "Can you talk to me?" His face was buried in her lap. "I don't want to give you up." When Yuan finally said, "You don't mind me hanging out with Kong Qiao anymore?" "Yi Mubai, even if I carry him, you won't mind, right?" He looked up. When Yuan continued, "I don't want to be domineering or give in. Yi Mubai, I just want an equal relationship." After saying that, she sighed. "I'm tired. I want to sleep for a while." However, he could only watch helplessly as she left. The next day, when Yuan was taken home by Yi Mubai, it wasn't the previous apartment, but a bigger and more luxurious place. He didn't want her to live there anymore. They had quarreled there, and she had almost lost her child there. It was not an auspicious place. The new apartment was also in a prime location. It was bigger than before, and the decoration was a little gentler than before. It was just like what Wen Yuan liked, and there was an expensive piano in the direction of the floor-to-ceiling window. Wen Yuan walked in slowly. Her eyes fell on the piano, and she was a little stunned. Chapter 38:48. Yi Mubai asked the driver to put down the things and leave. He hugged her gently from behind. "Do you like it? You can play the piano here in the future." Wen Yuan still looked at the piano quietly. After a long time, she was in a daze. "It's not convenient for me now." His palm slid down and landed on her bulging belly. His warm breath fell on her neck. It was a little numb. "Then play it after you give birth to the child. Let Xiangnan learn from you. We'll talk about it later," she said in a low voice and then asked him politely, "Where's my bedroom?" "Your bedroom?" He looked at her and repeated. When Yuan smiled faintly and nodded, "Yes, my bedroom." Yi Mubai turned her around and looked at her carefully. "We won't sleep separately." She seemed to be tired. "I'm pregnant and need a rest. Besides, we can't sleep together. The doctor said that." She used the doctor's words as a shield. Yi Mubai's heart skipped a beat. He knew what she was thinking, but he still had a glimmer of hope. He didn't say anything and brought her to a suite facing the south. This suite was about 80 square meters, and it came with a bathroom, changing room, and living room. It was very feminine, and her belongings had already been moved over. Wen Yuan was a meticulous woman. She naturally found that there were also his belongings. Did he still want to sleep in the same room with her? She didn't know what he was thinking. Did a husband and wife who had broken up like this still need to sleep in the same bed? At this time, she really wanted to go back to the hospital. At least there, she wouldn't have to worry about him climbing into her bed in the middle of the night. Wen Yuan admitted that she had lost hope in this relationship, but she had Xiangnan. The child in her belly needed a status. She wouldn't choose to leave Yi Mubai at this time. If a woman lost her mind without love, it would be very sad. In the end, she didn't object anymore. If he wanted to sleep together, they would sleep together. Anyway, she wasn't the one who was sad. When Yuan fell asleep, just like in a hospital, she treated him as invisible. She didn't talk to him, didn't communicate with him, and didn't even want to smile at him. Yi Mubai stood there, silently watching her as she slept. She slept peacefully. She wanted to protect the child. He could feel that she was deliberately controlling her emotions. Everything she was doing now was for the child and Xiangnan. Yi Mubai, was probably nothing in her life. Just thinking about it made him feel a little uncomfortable. But no matter how painful it was, he had to endure it day by day. She endured and took care of him. She was still the same. She was indifferent. It was not that she did not say a word, but she would say a few words when necessary. Especially in front of Xiangnan, she would act very normal. Occasionally, she would even smile, as if their relationship was normal. Yi Mubai sat at the dining table and watched her smile gently at Xiangnan. At this moment, he was actually jealous of his own son. He had been with her for the past few days and hadn't gone anywhere. He had even temporarily moved his office to the apartment across the street, afraid that something would happen to her and he wouldn't be around. He waited on her as if he was walking on thin ice, but he still couldn't walk into her heart. Kong Qiao said that when Yuan talked about him, there were little stars in her eyes. But when he looked at her now, there was only a pool of stagnant water, without any ripples. He wondered if she was only like this when she was with him. Toward others, like Kong Qiao, she could still ignite her passion. Chapter 38-49. Yi Mubai's gaze fell on Wen Yuan's face for a long time. Of course, she could feel his burning gaze, but she pretended not to notice. After dinner, she coaxed Xiangnan to sleep like before, then went back to her room to take a shower, apply her skincare products, and watch prenatal education for a while before going to bed. Her life was very regular. In this 600-square-meter apartment, there were 4 or 5 servants serving her, and she had Yi Mubai by her side. She lived a good life, but he didn't know if she felt good in her heart. Perhaps she had already regarded this place as a place to live, and it had nothing to do with feelings. Yi Mubai sat on the sofa in front of the French window in the bedroom, holding a cigarette in his hand, but he didn't light it. It was impossible for him to smoke in the bedroom. Although he smoked a little heavily recently, he restrained himself in front of her. It had been another month since she was discharged from the hospital. Her body had become rounder under proper care, and her face had gained some weight. He hugged her to sleep every night. He had needs, but he never dared to touch her, afraid that he wouldn't be able to control himself. The damn doctor said that they couldn't have sex before they had a child. He thought that even if they could, she wouldn't want it anymore. She might even hate it. Yi Mubai looked at the night outside, then looked at the bathroom door, guessing when she would come out. When Yuan came out, he was stunned for a moment when he saw him, then went over to apply his skincare products. He stared at her for a long time, but he still couldn't help walking over to her. When Yuan saw him in the mirror, but he paused for a moment before continuing to apply his skincare products, as if he didn't exist. Of course, Yi Mubai couldn't accept her ignoring him, and he was already suppressing his anger tonight. He put his hands on the back of her chair, leaned his face close to her neck, and said in a low voice, "Wen Yuan, you take such good care of yourself. Is it for me?" She was so disgusted with him, and he couldn't help but think that she was looking for a new home. Wen Yuan finished wiping the night cream on his hands, then said softly, "Are you looking for trouble tonight? If you must know, I'm doing it for myself. Are you satisfied?" He couldn't stand her talking to him like that. He wanted to pull her up, but when he saw her stomach, he held himself back. He closed his eyes. I wouldn't dare to cause trouble for you. After saying that, he left with a cigarette and lighter. She knew that he had gone outside to smoke. He had been smoking heavily recently. But what did it have to do with her? In the study, Yi Mubai was smoking fiercely. The whole study was filled with smoke. His eyes were a little red. He really did not understand Wen Yuan at all. When she loved someone, her eyes were like little stars, but when she hated someone, she could not wait to kill that person. She hated him so much that she did not give him any chance at all. He could guess what she was thinking. She was just waiting for the baby to be born so she could leave him. He knew it, but he was powerless to stop it. She hadn't touched the piano he had bought. She hadn't even looked at it. Other than the necessities, she hadn't opened any of the gifts he had given her. He had even seen her take off the ring he had given her, and he hadn't seen her wear the bracelet either. The line was clearly drawn. He smoked, and then he couldn't help but drink a few glasses of red wine. He did not dare to get drunk, afraid that he would hurt her. When he returned to the bedroom, Wen Yuan was already asleep. He thought, yes, she is so heartless now. Why would she wait for me? Chapter 3850. He walked into the bedroom and didn't turn on the lights. He stood at the head of the bed in the dark and watched her. She was sleeping peacefully, under the blanket, her slender limbs propped up her round belly. She looked rather cute, but in Yi Mubai's eyes, she was utterly detestable. He leaned forward and gently caressed her face. He was very meticulous. She was well taken care of, and she also took good care of herself. He was annoyed that he had rudely woken her up while he was still drunk. Wen Yuan opened her eyes and saw the tall figure at the head of the bed. He squatted down beside her. Her face was buried in the pillow, and she could still smell the faint smell of alcohol and tobacco. He had drunk. She instinctively wanted to move away, but he wouldn't let her. He grabbed onto her and dragged her over. His voice was deep and husky. Wen Yuan, do you not want to talk to me anymore? She stared at him in the dark, then turned her head away and closed her eyes. It's getting late. Are you going to throw a tantrum now? Yi Mubai, I'm pregnant. I know you're pregnant. Otherwise, do you think I would have been able to hold it in for so long? His voice was hoarse and full of danger. As he spoke, he leaned over and kissed her lips under her gaze. This was the first time he had kissed her in 2 months. Her belly was quite big, and it was hindering him. He carefully avoided it. The corner of his lips touched hers. The moment their lips touched, an indescribable feeling surged in his heart. He said in a low voice, Wen Yuan, if I could do it all over again, I wouldn't hurt you. I would choose to treat you well. She didn't make a sound, nor did she give him a response. He kissed her patiently. When he kissed her, he felt as though time had staggered. He really wanted to go back to the past, to the time when she loved him. He wanted to see the little stars in her eyes. He hoped that in her heart, he was still that caring and warm man. Can't go back? He murmured, kissing the corner of her lips gently. His voice was extremely hoarse. Wen Yuan still closed her eyes and let him kiss her. She didn't reject, resist, or respond. He was finally drunk. Taking advantage of the alcohol, he bit down hard on her lips. She endured the pain, and her fingers clenched the sheets beneath her. He acted fiercely and kissed her fiercely. When he looked up, his voice was filled with pain. Wen Yuan, you don't even know how to cry out in pain, do you? She still didn't say anything. Yi Mubai closed his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, Will you love me again? Wen Yuan did not answer him. If she said that she would be lying. She didn't want to do that anymore. She was no longer the girl who smiled at him and played all kinds of tricks. She was tired. She had not only lost love, but also her 2 children and her life. She was tired and did not want to love. If love, she chooses to love herself. Yi Mubai rolled to the side and hugged her from the side. His face was buried in her neck. He had an indescribable pain. Later, perhaps because he was unwilling, perhaps because he wanted to prove something, he pulled her hand and forced himself on her. Wen Yuan was stunned. As he struggled, he said in a broken voice, Yi Mubai, let go of me. He did not let go of her. He hugged her tightly in his arms, avoiding her stomach. His voice was especially hoarse. Wen Yuan, I'm going crazy. When he said this, his voice was trembling. I've never been like this. I've never regretted it so much. Chapter 38:51. His face was buried deep in her neck like a child who lacked love. However, what he forced her to do wasn't like what a child would do. It was urgent and shameful, so when Yuan didn't struggle, it was like a huge wave rolling the sand. The more intense it was, the slower it would calm down. His breath was scorching hot as it sprayed into her neck. His voice was also very urgent. Wen Yuan, love me, please? He reached out to hug her, as if he wanted to crush her in his arms. Wen Yuan didn't make sound. If he wanted to kiss her, she could give him the pleasure of sharing their bodies. However, when he said that he wanted her to love him again, she couldn't give it. She didn't want to give it. Love wasn't something that could be given as one wished. It wasn't something that could be given as one wished. She had no strength left to face him. Yimu Bai was already an arrow at the end of its flight, but he still wasn't willing to give up and continued to mess around. However, he couldn't go back after all. He took advantage of the alcohol and messed around for half the night, but it was just a bluff. Everything calmed down. When Yuan leaned into his arms, her face rubbing against his black shirt. The texture was very good, and his scent was very pleasant. In the past, if he was willing to hug her for so long, she would be very happy. However, she didn't feel anything at all now. She only felt that it was a burden. He couldn't control his emotions, and she was like a pool of stagnant water. It was hard to maintain such a relationship, just like in the past. The difference was that they didn't even have the tacit understanding of sharing their bodies. After a long time, Yimu Bai's voice was very soft. Let me help you wash up. He seemed to have returned to normal. He quietly took a hot towel to wipe her hands and covered her with a blanket. His dark eyes stared at her silently for a long time before he said in a low voice, I'm going to take a shower. Wen Yuan closed her eyes. There was a thin layer of red on her face, and she looked very beautiful when buried in her hair. He was a little moved when he saw her, and he especially wanted to kiss her for a while longer. However, her cold look made him give up. He got up and went to the changing room to get a bathrobe to take a shower. He was gone for about half an hour before he came back. Wen Yuan knew that it wasn't enough just now, so he probably took care of it himself. She buried her face in the pillow and turned sideways, trying hard not to interact with him. Yimu Bai lay flat on the bed, silently looking at the ceiling, not saying anything. That was the state of their marriage. Even though Xiangnan was a child, he was a smart child. Even though his parents did not quarrel, he could still sense something. He asked Wen Yuan once if he would be separating from his father. Wen Yuan looked at him for a long time before asking softly, Are you willing to be with mommy? Xiangnan stared at her for a few seconds before he reached out and hugged her waist. He pressed his hand against her bulging belly and said softly, And the baby? Wen Yuan smiled and patted his head. Their marriage continued indifferently. Wen Yuan didn't care about him, but she had someone she cared about. She cared about Xiangnan and the baby in her belly. She slowly found her own interests. She began to learn flower arranging and tea making. It was all done at home by the trainer she asked Suemo to find. She became happier day by day. Yimu Bai could see it, but she was still cold to him. They often slept together for a night and didn't talk much. Yimu Bai sometimes suspected that she had a heart of stone, but more often than not, he knew that it was his doing. Chapter 38:52. By Shuali brought by Ain into New York. She had brought a lot of things from B City and stayed there for a few days to accompany Wen Yuan. Everyone in the Yi family knew about Wen Yuan and Yimu Bai. They had all come to the hospital, but Wen Yuan didn't talk much at that time, and no one dared to force her talk. After being slapped twice by Yi Zhenggang, Yimu Bai was finally unyielding. Is your wife and child more important, or the woman you like more important? Your wife said she wasn't feeling well, and you still wanted to leave. Why did you marry her if you don't like her? Why didn't you do a test tube test? Oh, you want to have fun, right? Anyway, the woman you like is getting married, and it doesn't matter who you marry. Is that what you think? Yimu Bai didn't say anything, but Yi Zhenggang was certain and scolded him. In the end, it was Su Fu who pulled him away. They all felt sorry for Wen Yuan, and were even more worried about the child in Xiangnan and Wen Yuan's womb. They were afraid that Wen Yuan would be disappointed with Yi Mubai and give up on the child. But not only did Wen Yuan wake up, the child was also saved. But everyone could see that the expression in her eyes was different. She no longer looked at Yi Mubai with love, but calmness. She had returned to her normal self. Bai Shuili was really afraid that they would get a divorce. To her, it was a dilemma. Cici was her friend, and Wen Yuan was also her friend and family. If Wen Yuan and Xiao Bai got a divorce, it would be hard for Cici to continue living. She was the victim of a car accident. Yi Mubai had messed up the family, but it had nothing to do with Cici. She wanted to speak up for Cici, and Wen Yuan could tell. He poured her a cup of flower tea and said softly, "What happened between us has nothing to do with others. It's our own fault." Bai Shuili felt sad again. She bit her lip and looked at him. Wen Yuan smiled. "It's not her fault. Wen Yuan." Bai Shuili reached out and pulled his hand. "I'm a little sad to see you like this." "Fool, what are you feeling sad about?" Wen Yuan smiled faintly and reached out to pinch Bai Shuili's face. "You're still crying? You're already so big. No wonder Yimulin always said that you're still like a child. He said that even though he has 2 children, and is more sensible than you." "That's what he said." Bai Shuili stuttered, then bit her lip and didn't say anything else. It was rare for her to come, so Wen Yuan's mood was a little better. "I'm not convinced. Aren't you just being willful because he likes you?" Bai Shuili could not help but complain. "When did I do that? You don't know how difficult it is to deal with old men. He said it was for me, but it was all for his own bad taste. Wen Yuan, you don't understand Yimulin. He's just very immoral." Wen Yuan smiled. Then they started chatting. Bai Shuili felt that Wen Yuan was quite normal. How'd he end up like this with Lao Bai? Before leaving New York, she and Yi Mubai made an appointment at a small bar outside to have a chat. Yi Mubai had been smoking the whole time. Wen Yuan looked at him, frowning slightly, and pursed his lips. "Lao Bai, you weren't like this in the past." She had pursued Lao Bai before. He used to be pure and live like a monk. Later on, he only fell in love with Lin Cici. It was not bad, but Lin Cici liked Guzé. She was hurt all over, and her heart was still with Guzé. There was nothing she could do about it. End of chapter. Chapter 38:53. But Wen Yuan was everyone's surprise. Bai Shuili took a sip of the iced beer. It felt good, but she only dared to drink a small glass. She lowered her eyes and said softly, "Old Bai, I used to secretly envy Wen Yuan. She did what I couldn't do in the past. You see, I chased after you shamelessly for so long, but I didn't get anything. Wen Yuan was different. She got together with you, and she was so amazing in my heart. But then she was lying on the hospital bed, and her child was almost gone. I was wondering if Wen Yuan wasn't amazing anymore, or if it was because you didn't love her, so she didn't want to love you anymore." Yi Mubai smiled faintly. "Who knows? You clearly know what she's thinking and doing now. It's a good thing that she's learning how to arrange flowers and how to make tea, but she's not in your world anymore, old Bai." Bai Shuili emphasized. "Aren't you worried at all?" Yi Mubai stared into her eyes and smiled bitterly. "Shueli, is there any use for me to be worried? I treat her well, and I almost don't go out, but—" He rubbed his good-looking chin and lowered his voice. "But she still wants to leave." Yes, she wanted to leave. He could tell that her heart wasn't with him, or with Kong Xiao, or with her other dreams. It wouldn't be with him, Yi Mubai. After he finished speaking, he took a deep puff of his cigarette and drank a glass of iced beer. It felt good after drinking it, and it didn't burn up. He closed his eyes gently. "Shueli, I don't know how to treat her. I'm afraid that she'll leave even if I use up all my strength. You can make her stay." Bai Shueli reached out and knocked his head. "You're not like the little Bai know-it-all. You're the Yi Mubai that she's been infatuated with for many years. Wen Yuan is just temporary. Believe me, she cares about you." Yi Mubai leaned against the back of the chair and murmured, "Cares." He let out a long sigh. When he raised his head, the corners of his eyes felt warm. It was an indescribable and complicated feeling. Bai Shuili stared at him. She realized that Lao Bai had changed. In the past, Lao Bai wasn't like this. He was very, very Buddhist. Even when it came to Cici, he would let her go easily. There was only one possibility for him to change, and that was, she asked softly, Lao Bai, have you ever thought that you might like Wen Yuan very, very much? Or have you fallen in love with her? Only when you love someone will you feel the pain of not being able to get what you want. Lao Bai's current state was exactly that. Yimu Bai stared at her for a long time before he let out a long sigh. Perhaps. It's good that you admit it. Wen Yuan is still your wife. You should get her back. You still have 2 children, Bai Shuali said softly, encouraging him. Yimu Bai pursed his lips and smiled faintly. Later, he got up and said, I'll send you back to the hotel. She didn't stay in the apartment mainly because it was inconvenient. She had chased after Lao Bai for 18 streets in the past. Bai Shuali saw that it was getting late. She nodded and took her bag for him to send to the hotel. When Yimu Bai returned to the apartment from the hotel, it was already 10 o'clock at night. Because Bai Shuali was there, when Yuan's tea art class was moved to later. He was still in class at 10 o'clock. He threw his car keys down and looked at her. Still in class. When Yuan was making tea with a young female teacher. The female teacher was also Chinese. She wasn't even 30 years old. She was very pretty and wore a long white dress. Her black hair was long and straight, and she had a classical beauty. End of chapter. Chapter 3854. Yimu Bai was a director. He took a second look, but didn't say anything. He changed his shoes, leaned over, and kissed Wen Yuan's forehead. Don't stay up too late. I'm going to take a shower first. Wen Yuan didn't resist his intimacy. She was willing to save him some face in front of outsiders. So she smiled and watched him enter the bedroom. He didn't say hello to the young teacher because it was unnecessary. But the female teacher looked at his back and asked Wen Yuan casually, Mrs. Yi, you and Mr. Yi seem to have a good relationship. Wen Yuan smiled. It's not that bad. She didn't want to talk about Yimu Bai, so she changed the topic. Ms. Song, try this. Song Yu came back to her senses and tasted it. It's very good, but her eyes drifted to the direction of the master bedroom. Wen Yuan just looked at her quietly and didn't say anything. In Song Yu's eyes, a super mansion of 600 square meters on Jinghua Road, a handsome man, a pregnant wife, and the fact that she could come over at any time were all opportunities for her. Song Yu was a 28-year-old girl. She had been in love twice, but her partners were always hardworking men like her. They couldn't give her the life she wanted. With such men, even if she wore beautiful clothes, she couldn't live in a place that was less than 20 square meters when she got home. That wasn't the life she wanted to live. She was young, beautiful, and virtuous. She didn't want to go to those places. Now, Yimu Bai had given her a lot of space to fantasize, and she couldn't wait to have him. In the next few days, Yimu Bai found that he met Miss Song more often. When he came back from the opposite office to visit Wen Yuan, he would always see Song Yu at their house. Later, he asked the servants at home, Why does the tea art teacher always come? Isn't there only 1.5 hours of tea art class every day? The servant thought for a while and said, Miss Song seems to come a little more these days, but she said that she and Mrs. Yi are very good friends. She paused. Sir, as servants, it's not good for us to interfere with Mrs. Ye's affairs. Yimu Bai didn't say anything and went to the study. He took some documents and was going to go back to the studio, but now he didn't plan to go back. He just read in the study. After watching for a long time, a strange voice sounded at the door. Mr. Yi, do you need a cup of tea? Yimu Bai looked up at Song Yu quietly. Where's my wife? He was a little unhappy because he didn't like people entering his study, let alone a stranger. Song Yu was still dressed in white today. She wore an off-shoulder knitted shirt and a tulle skirt. She was beautiful and intellectual. She was a woman who was good at dressing up and managing herself. She would live the life she wanted. She knew that men in the upper class needed to know themselves, just like Mr. Yi. Their relationship seems to be good, but she finds it is not good after a long time. She dares to bet that Mr. Yi is a man who hasn't had sex for a long time. The relationship between a man and a woman can be seen from their body language. She sees him kissing his wife for the first time. Although when Yuan doesn't push him away, his body is very stiff. All of this gave Song Yu an excuse. She told herself that it wasn't wrong for her to get close to Yimu Bai. This was a man who couldn't get his wife's warmth. She just gave him a little warmth, and then she got what she wanted. It was just taking what she needed. In a chapter. Chapter 3855. At this time, Yi Mubai asks. Song Yu smiles. When Yuan said he was a little sleepy and wanted to sleep for a while. I thought it would be a pity to leave the tea we made, so I wanted to bring it to Mr. Yi to have a taste. She always knows when to advance and when to retreat. She doesn't come in at once, but just stands at the door. What kind of man is Yi Mubai? The women who used to chase after him are lined up from here to France. Song Yu is just a woman. This kind of stupid pickup makes him disgusted. Not to mention that he has a wife and a son now. Wen Yuan is her student. He spent a lot of money to invite her to teach him, but the woman in front of him just wants to climb into his bed. Is Wen Yuan so stupid? But he knows clearly that Wen Yuan is not so stupid. She can see it, but he lets such a woman stay in their house. What does Wen Yuan want to do? Yi Mubai squints his eyes and says lightly, I don't like tea. Thank you, Miss Song. Song Yu is a little embarrassed. She doesn't expect that he would be so unreasonable. He is usually a very gentle person, but she is not reconciled. She still wants to have a try. So she smiles lightly. Mr. Yi, do you like coffee or something else? Shall I make it for you? Yi Mubai says very lightly, I don't need it. Besides, you are the tea art teacher invited by Wen Yuan. You should focus on teaching instead of paying too much attention to her husband. Song Yu is a little embarrassed, standing at the door. He pauses. You are fired. Song Yu's face is full of disbelief. Her lips tremble slightly. Why? Don't you know why? He says very lightly, Miss Song, if there is nothing else, you can leave now. Song Yu's expression seems to be insulted. She bites her lips and stares at Yi Mubai. Mr. Yi, I don't know what I did wrong. Yi Mubai gets up and walks to her slowly. He looks at her condescendingly, and his voice is very low. Since I was 20 years old, there have been many women chasing me. I won't blame them. But now I have a wife. Miss Song, I admire your 3 views. Do you think I will still let you stay in my house? He said it so bluntly that Song Yu couldn't deny it. She bit her lip and wanted to leave, but when she moved her eyes, she saw Wen Yuan standing at the door of the bedroom, looking at them. Song Yu quickly rushed forward and hugged Yi Mubai tightly, as if she was staking everything in one throw. Ever since she was young, there had been countless men who had feelings for her, but there had never been a man who treated her like this, completely without mercy. Even if she couldn't have him, she didn't want to let him have it easy. He was too hateful. Yi Mubai frowned and immediately saw Wen Yuan opposite him. Wen Yuan's face seemed to be slightly hurt. He immediately pushed Song Yu away and raised his voice. Take this woman away. Song Yu bumped into the opposite door in embarrassment. At this time, the family servants ran over and guessed what had happened. They immediately dragged Song Yu aside and said, Miss Song, how could you do such a thing? Madam is so good to you. Song Yu still couldn't come back to her senses. After a while, she came back to her senses. She was a little absent-minded, and then she chuckled softly. Okay, yes, it's really good. She had been tricked. From the beginning to the end, she was just a chess piece. Wen Yuan had always known what she was thinking, but he had never said it. He let Song Yu come over and watch her make a fool of herself and be amorous, while Wen Yuan, who was holding his 6-month-old belly, watched coldly from the side. End of this chapter. Chapter 3856. Song Yu left. Before she left, she raised her head arrogantly. Her behavior and actions fully explained one thing, which was that she had a lofty heart and a fragile life. She thought that Wen Yuan was a fool, but in Wen Yuan's eyes, she was nothing at all. After Song Yu left, the servants also left, anticipating that there would be a big fight at home. It was obvious that the male host and the female host didn't get along very well. Usually it was fine, but today, because of Miss Song's matter, they were probably going to have a big fight. The house of a few hundred square meters was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. Yi Mubai walked over slowly, grabbed Wen Yuan's hand, and dragged her into the study. The door was closed gently, and he suppressed his voice. Why did you do that? Wen Yuan held his stomach, walked to the sofa, and sat down. I don't know what you're talking about. You deliberately allowed Song Yu to get close to me and seduce me. Wen Yuan, what do you want to see? He leaned forward and held the back of the sofa with one hand to get close to her. Do you want to see a pornographic scene between me and her? As he said that, he pinched her chin with one hand and said with an ugly expression on his face, Am I such a lousy man? In your heart, as long as a woman who looks decent gets close to you and seduces you, I will be so hungry that I will not be picky, am I right? I didn't say that. She was forced to look up and meet his gaze. Under the dim yellow light, Yimubai's gaze was unfathomable as he stared into her eyes. There was a storm in his eyes, and there was a touch of heartache. He said slowly, But you did it. He pulled her into his arms gently and brought her to the bathroom without being too rude. When Yuan didn't doubt that if she hadn't been pregnant today, she would have been killed by him. He dragged her to the sink, hugged her from behind, and trapped her, forcing her to look into the mirror. His voice was unbelievably hoarse. Tell me, what do you think? Catch us cheating and then negotiate the terms and divorce after giving birth to the child, right? When Yuan looked at him in the mirror and smiled. Yimubai, do you think I need to use on you if I want a divorce? I just don't care about it. And I don't care what happens between you and others, so everything happens naturally. It doesn't matter to me whether you accept it or not. It doesn't matter. He muttered these words and then laughed softly. Yes, when Yuan, it doesn't matter anymore. You don't love me anymore, do you? Yes. She stared into his eyes and said without hesitation. It was a provocation and a declaration. Yimubai's mind went blank for a moment. He asked, but he didn't expect her to say it so straightforwardly. The air froze for a moment. After a long time, Yimubai's gaze softened. It was no longer as fierce as before. Instead, there was a hint of warmth in his calm eyes. His hands tightened slowly, and then he was holding her, hugging her gently from behind, his face buried in her hair, her neck, his expression vulnerable. Sorry, Wen Yuan. His lips were pressed against her artery, so his voice was muffled. I'm sorry. I won't be mean to you anymore. In the future, I will never ask you to love me. I love you, that's all. He closed his eyes and held her tightly. He hugged her and imagined that he could see the little stars in her eyes when he looked up. He imagined that she still loved him. Please remember the domain name of this book. Jiuqian Shenwang. Chapter 38:57. But that was just his imagination, his imagination. Her love for him ended when he left. Yimubai hugged her. He hugged her like that for a long time, as though he was going to hold her until the end of time. Wen Yuan didn't struggle and let him hug her. Finally, he murmured, Don't let her come again. I won't like her, and I won't like anyone else. Wen Yuan smiled faintly. Yes, he wouldn't like anyone else, including Wen Yuan. He only liked Lin Cece. She didn't talk to him, and she didn't respond to his words. Yimubai was frustrated. He still let go of her and slowly stepped back. His voice was hoarse. You should rest. Wen Yuan turned to the side and paused for a moment before saying softly, Yimubai, some things are in the past. I don't want to force myself, so don't force me, okay? Her voice was even lower. I just want to give birth to the child now. And then, he stood at the door and clenched his hands. Wen Yuan, I shouldn't have asked, but I still asked. I'm not someone who can't control his emotions. Do you know what this means? After he finished speaking, he was a little nervous and slowly turned his head. Wen Yuan shook her head and leaned against the sink. She lowered her gaze and refused to meet his eyes. I don't care anymore, Yimubai. Loving someone is tiring. After exhausting all my energy, I'm really, really tired, he said. I can love you. Wen Yuan just shook his head and smiled lightly. She held her stomach and walked out, walking past him. Yimubai immediately grabbed her hand. He didn't say anything and just grabbed her hand. There were too many thoughts hidden in such an action. Wen Yuan still broke free and slowly left the study, as though she was leaving his world. Yimubai closed his eyes and clenched his fists tightly. The days continued, cold and indifferent. If it was an ordinary couple, there was nothing wrong with living like this. Most couples should live like this. But Yimubai was not satisfied. He was not satisfied with this kind of life. He wanted her to love him, and he also wanted to love her. She didn't give him a chance. As always, he insisted on sleeping in the same bed with her. Sometimes he couldn't help but take her hand and hold her in his arms like before. Wen Yuan had been passive, letting him do whatever he wanted. As long as it didn't affect the child in her stomach, she didn't seem to care. He was disappointed, but he couldn't find a way out. Once on the way back, he was a little distracted while driving, and his car rear-ended the car in front of him. After the crash, cold sweat broke out on his back, and he sat in the car for a long time without coming back to his senses. At that time, he wondered how Wen Yuan would feel if he died, and Wen Yuan still hadn't forgiven him. Then, he lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. He probably didn't feel anything. There had always been a knot between him and her, and that was Lin Cece. She didn't mention it, and he didn't mention it either. It was like a thorn in her heart. She didn't want to pull it out because she had lost hope in him. Yi Mubai suddenly leaned on the steering wheel and didn't get up for a long time. Just then, the car door opened, and a slightly fierce face appeared. He used vulgar English to hurl insults and racial slurs. Yi Mubai slowly looked up, and his eyes were bloodshot. Then, he unbuttoned his seatbelt, then his jacket, and finally unbuttoned his shirt. He rolled his sleeves up to his elbows and got out of the car. Please remember the domain name of this book. Come, Wonderful Book House. Come. Chapter 3858. The Caucasian man thought that Yi Chun was an Asian man who could be bullied easily, but Yi Chun was more than 180 centimeters tall, and his eyes were full of hostility. The Caucasian man's legs trembled, and he almost peed his pants. Before he could beg, Yi Mubai punched him and broke the Caucasian man's nose. Blood and tears flew everywhere. But this was far from enough. Yi Mubai punched and kicked him until he was half dead. Get up and fight back. Are you still going to call yourself the sick man of East Asia? Huh? The Caucasian man lay on the ground in a terrible state, clutching his ribs. Shen-in, lunatic. You must have met a lunatic. He shouted in English. I'm going to put you in jail. Just you wait. You're finished, you damn Asian man. What awaited him was another round of punches and kicks. He was beaten until he was half disabled. Of course, Yi Mubai was also taken to the police station and locked up. No one knew who leaked the news, but it was all over the news. After all, he was a famous director, and he was once a best actor. After half a day, the incident had escalated beyond recognition. The public relations department of his film company was busy with public relations, while Su Mo went to see Yi Mubai first. Everyone was convinced by Yi Mubai's actions. They really hadn't seen anyone who didn't care about their reputation more than him. They could have just chased after someone and settled it privately. Why did he have to beat them until they were half dead? Great, of course. Su Mo couldn't blame her boss. She just communicated with him about the situation, such as whether to hire a local lawyer or a lawyer from New York. Call my brother. He's familiar with this area, Yi Mubai said calmly. Su Mo, after a while, she nodded. Okay, I'll contact him. Also, this matter is written in the newspaper. Wen Yuan should have seen it. Director Yi, do you want to see him? Yi Mubai looked at Su Mo and suddenly asked, does he want to see me? Su Mo couldn't answer this question. Yi Mubai smiled faintly and then said, I don't think he wants to see me either. Let's leave it at that. He let out a long sigh. Let's leave it at that. Ask the lawyer to bail me out as soon as possible. Su Mo thought to himself, I thought you didn't want to go out. In the end, after Yi Mulin received the call, he flew into a rage at his house in B City and threw his cup. His temper was similar to Yi Zhenggong's. Bai Shuili didn't say anything. Although she didn't know much about these things, she knew how serious the matter was when she saw Yi Mulin's anger. Yi Mulin vented his anger and then said in a cold voice, he's doing this for Wen Yuan to see. Wen Yuan ignored him, and he did this. Isn't it ridiculous for a man in his 30s? Bai Shuili said softly. Xiao Bai is just trying to save an old horse. Cure my ass. Yi Mulin immediately cursed. He's crazy. Do you know how many years you'll be sentenced to in America? His family's rice worm looked at him eagerly. More than 3 years. Yi Mulin took out a cigarette and put it in his mouth. Before he could light it up, he couldn't help but put it down. If that person is disabled, he'll be waiting to spend the rest of his life in jail. After saying that, he started to smoke. Bai Shuili tugged at his sleeve. He glared at her. He was in a bad mood and even wanted to be fierce to her. Riceworm tugged at him again. What are you doing? He was in a bad mood and threw her face. However, Bai Shuili was a thick-skinned person. She tugged at him again, and her voice was like a little lamb. Yi Mulin. Chapter 38:59. He was still looking at her as he lit a cigarette and took a puff. Bai Shuili immediately massaged his back and flattered him like a bee. Hubby is the best. He enjoyed it but snorted coldly. Don't even think about it. What kind of taste do you have? Back then, you followed Mu Bai's ass for so many years. Your eyes are practically blind. And when Yuan too. How bad must his taste be to like Mu Bai? Look at how childish he is. Bai Shuili felt that she was doing everything for the harmony of the family. But why was she the one being attacked now? She was innocent. Thus, she said unhappily, Xiao Bai is Wen Yuan's man now. Go talk to your ex-wife if you have the ability. What ex-wife? He pulled her out from behind and hugged her in his arms, knocking her head. The cigarette in his hand accidentally touched her hair. There was a burning smell. Bai Shuili shrieked, and he panicked too. He put out the cigarette in a flurry and looked at her. She glared at him. You're so mean to me, and you even burn my hair. Yi Mulin smiled helplessly. All right. It's a matter between them. Why are we getting angry here? Mulin. Her expression softened, and she reached out to hold his hand. Her expression was as soft as a small animal. Although it's their matter, can you think of a way? When I went to see them last time, when Yuan was fine, but Old Bai wasn't good at all. It was as if he was going crazy. Her voice was soft, lovesickness. You know. Yi Mulin looked at her in annoyance and amusement. She hugged him and said coquettishly, think about it. One is your brother, and the other is your ex-wife. If you don't help them, who will? Bai Shuili, try calling me ex-wife. You're my ex-wife. He knocked her little head. She smiled foolishly, and he couldn't do anything about it. He smoked for a while more and called Secretary Li to ask about his schedule. He then asked Secretary Li to spare 3 days, and he had to fly immediately. Actually, with his identity, he couldn't leave the country at will. However, Mu Bai's matter was not a small matter, and he couldn't rest assured if he didn't make a trip. Bai Shuili hugged him and kissed him when she saw how resolute he was. I'm going to pack my luggage. Yi Mulin reached out to stop her. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Surely, we're going to deal with something. Do you think it's a holiday? She blinked. If you go, Mu Bai will be fine. He was stunned for a moment, then he smiled. Without saying anything, he dragged her over and held her in his arms. He kissed it and pressed it against his chest. Bai Shuili obediently let him hug her, not moving at all. Then, she quietly reached out and hugged his waist. Her voice was very soft. Yi Mulin, do you love me very much? Fool. His voice was hot. Do you love me very, very much? She asked again. This time, he knocked her little head. Go pack your luggage. She howled and jumped away. Yi Mulin looked at her and smiled. Then, he lit another cigarette. After all, this matter was a little big. He really wanted to open Mu Bai's head and ask him what he was thinking. He wasn't impulsive, but he did something impulsive. He knew that he did it because of Wen Yuan. He wanted Wen Yuan to care and break Wen Yuan's indifference. He could even use his own method to settle it. However, he still let the matter fester. Please remember the domain name of this book. .com. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 3860. Yi Mulin felt that it was serious because he realized how important Wen Yuan was in Mu Bai's heart. But Wen Yuan no longer loved Mu Bai. Yi Mulin and Bai Shuili flew to New York overnight, but it didn't bring her, leaving her with Su Fu. When they arrived in New York, it was snowing in the early morning. They went to Wen Yuan's apartment. She was there, and so was Su Mo. At that moment, Wen Yuan stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window in the living room, looking at the gentle snow outside. She didn't make a sound. Bai Shuili called her Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan turned around and looked at them quietly. Then she smiled. You're here. She wasn't a fool. She knew why Mu Bai was being so impulsive. Was it to make it impossible for her to live indifferently? He wanted to force out a reaction. He wanted to see what kind of reaction she would have. Wen Yuan didn't know what she should do. She should play the role of a virtuous wife and think of a way to get him out. She felt that it was ridiculous. Wasn't he being a little too willful? Yi Mulin's arrival made things much simpler. His connections in the American legal system were terrifying, and he had many unknown methods. Yi Mulin stayed in the apartment for a while and went to see Yi Mubai's lawyer. This was Yi Mulin's schoolmate in the United States, and he was the best lawyer in the United States. When he went out, Wen Yuan and Bai Shuili were still in the apartment. Bai Shuili endured the sleepiness and didn't go to deal with the jet lag. She kept Wen Yuan and Xiangnan company. Xiangnan was such a good child. Bai Shuili thought that he was much better than an nun. In the afternoon, when Yi Mulin came back, he came back with Yi Mubai. The brothers got out of the elevator but didn't go back to the apartment first. Instead, they sat by the window and smoked together. Yi Mulin suppressed the fire in his heart and puffed out a smoke ring. Mubai, this isn't your style. Yi Mubai lowered his head and lit his cigarette. He took a puff and looked into the distance. He smiled. Stupid, isn't it? I don't even know when she will leave me. She doesn't want me to accompany her or take care of her. We live together and sleep in the same bed every night, but we are no different from strangers. I'm not satisfied. This is the first time I'm so dissatisfied. It's your own fault for not being satisfied. Mubai, I know that you liked Lin Cece in the past, but Wen Yuan is your wife. Perhaps you have feelings for Lin Cece in your heart, but for a man, feelings aren't the most important. Responsibility is the most important. This time, if the child is gone, think about it yourself. Apart from the fact that you and Wen Yuan are done for, what should Nan do? Even if it's a transplant, will he have to suffer? There's also the rejection he'll have to suffer. Yi Mubai didn't say anything. He just silently looked outside. Yi Mulin looked at him. He could understand the pain in Yi Mubai's heart. Perhaps it was a contradiction. A woman that he didn't really care about suddenly didn't care about him. When he wanted to make it up to her, it was a terrible feeling. After a long time, he patted Yi Mubai's shoulder again. His voice was a little hoarse. Mubai, it's all in the past. Treat her well in the future. Wen Yuan is a good woman. I know. Yi Mubai turned and looked at him. After a while, he repeated bitterly, I know. Chapter 38:61. Yi Mulin smiled. It's good that you know. Don't do anything stupid anymore. Mom and Dad aren't young anymore, and Uncle Hao dotes on them. Dad is alone and isn't doing well. Yi Mubai smiled bitterly. After a long while, he sighed. Did she say anything? She? You mean Wen Yuan? Yi Mulin smiled. Ask her yourself if you want to know. He patted Yi Mubai's shoulder. All right, let's go home. He paused. I thought it was a big deal. That scoundrel agreed to drop the lawsuit after paying tens of thousands of dollars. He even said that he was in good health and didn't want to make such a big deal out of it in the future. It's too passive for me to come over and help you clean up the mess. The woman who doesn't come over will cry again. With that, he punched Yi Mubai's chest and led the way to the condominium. Yi Mubai finished his cigarette and followed. The door to the condominium opened. It was warm inside, and he stepped in. Yi Mulin had his wife by his side. There's no problem. I'm rushing for the private flight tonight. You guys have a good talk. With that, he glanced at Wen Yuan. Wen Yuan sat on the sofa and nodded slightly. She still had some respect for Yi Mulin. Bai Shuili was unhappy and grabbed her husband's hand when they were outside. You're leaving so soon. You want to stay and be the third wheel? He glared at her. Bai Shuili looked at him and felt a little wronged. But I can't leave just like that. I haven't had a good sleep yet. We're leaving tomorrow afternoon, he said suddenly. Riceworm gasped and looked at him in a daze. Really? Why did you lie just now? She added. Yi Mubai looked at her and said slowly after a while, Idiot. I'm not stupid. She jumped up and threw herself into his arms like a bear hugging a tree root. Yi Mulin looked down at her. Bai Shuili, how old are you? Why are you still so childish? I'm so childish. She leaned on his shoulder for him to carry her. Then she said coquettishly, You said I'm your baby. I did say that. He held her easily with one hand and pulled her ear with the other. Bai Shuili, do you believe what men say in bed? I just believe. She acted coquettishly, then wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. Can you say it to me later? Yi Mulin stared at her. then reached out and patted her, but lightly. "We're not going to the hotel to have sex. We're going to rest." He rubbed his forehead. "I'm so tired. Mumbai is so troublesome, and so are you." He held her in his arms as they walked in the soft snow. He shoved her into the car and got in after her. She stuck to him again and obediently lay in his arms. He was afraid that she was cold, so he opened his coat and let her nestle in his chest. She breathed into his chest through the coat, and it was warm and ticklish. Yulin lowered his head and glanced at her silently. Then he closed his eyes and let her be. She was always teasing him. When he really couldn't stand it anymore, he gently pulled her hair and frowned. "By Shiweli, you're courting death." She smiled and nibbled on his shoulder. "I thought you wouldn't be angry." He pinched her chin and forced her to look up. Then he said in a dangerous voice, "By Shiweli, it seems like you're not afraid at all." Chapter 3862. The consequences of provoking him were tragic. By Shiweli was brought to the hotel, and after closing the door of the presidential suite, he brutally pressed her against the door and kissed her fiercely. He did not let her go until her legs went soft. One of his legs was still stuck there, and his eyes were burning. "Are you still going to seduce me?" By Shiweli shamelessly sat on his lap and said coquettishly, "I don't dare." She didn't dare. She was seducing him now. He was annoyed and amused at the same time. He reached out and flicked her forehead. "You've been busy the whole day. Give me a massage." With that said, he carried her to the bed and threw her on it. He lay on his stomach. The person who was fooling around with him looked at his tired face and felt sorry for him. She sat down and massaged him, saying softly, "You're very tired. What do you think?" This was an old man's trick. Endless meetings, and the house is not peaceful. You're the one who makes the most noise. Just as he finished speaking, the person who was massaging him leaned over and hugged him from behind. Yulin was annoyed and amused. He touched her face with the back of his hand. "What's wrong? Are you acting coquettishly again? Or do you want to feel my warmth again?" With that said, he turned over and pressed her down, kissing her chin. "You're killing me." She knew that he had misunderstood, so she quickly hugged his neck and bit her lip. "I'm not. I just..." As she said that, she lowered her gaze and reached out to hug Yulin lightly. She said very softly, "Yulin, it's all because of me that you're working so hard, isn't it?" He stared at her little face and smiled. "Why are you suddenly so sentimental?" He reached out to pinch her face deliberately. "You're not such a sentimental person." "I am now." She harumphed. "At least I am for the next 2 days." She hugged his neck, wanting to hug him and kiss her. Yulin was annoyed and amused. She was really getting younger and younger. She was even more clingy and shameless than an un. But he liked it. Or maybe he liked it. And that was why she was like this. Actually, she had always been trying to make him happy, trying to give him a little more fun after his hard work. His heart warmed. He reached out and gently pinched her face. "Shiweli, I actually have a lot of fun every day." She didn't understand and looked at him. He smiled and didn't tell her that it was fine as long as she was by his side. If she was by his side, he wouldn't feel that it was hard. Originally, Chief he had wanted to do something, but now he gave up. He turned to the side and pulled her into his arms, closing his eyes. "Sleep with me. I'm really tired." He worked in politics and was good at scheming in front of people. He never made a wrong move. Only in front of her would he say that he was tired. Baishuli had been with him for a long time, so she was very sensible. She obediently lay on his chest, and after a while, she moved closer. "Let me help you take off your shoes, okay?" Seeing that he was so tired, her heart ached a little. Although she usually acted coquettishly, he was her man and the person she loved. Naturally, her heart ached. He grunted, and she went over to help him take off his shoes like a little maid. She was very diligent. Yulin looked down at her for a while and smiled. He did not say anything else and kept his eyes closed. After a while, she obediently climbed into his arms and slept with him. Chapter 3863. She was very obedient, he thought to himself. Others could only see that he was always doing things for her, but Shirley was actually very good to him, and it was enough for him to know. He closed his eyes, hugged her in his arms, and patted her little head. I'll take you shopping tomorrow. It seems like I haven't been with you for a long time. Bai Shiuli yelped and looked up at him. She thought that he didn't know, but it was as if he had grown a third eye. He smiled silently. Bai Shiuli, can you work harder? You've already used me so many times. Don't look like you haven't tasted it yet, okay? She pushed herself up a little. What's sex? Yim Yulin, you're too rough. Is that so? He pulled her down and turned around, pressing against her. Their faces were hot. Her face was red, and she bit her lip as she said, Yim Yulin, didn't you say you wanted to sleep? Yes, I want to sleep. His long fingers caressed her face gently. Sleep with me. Her face turned even redder. He leaned over and bit the tip of her nose. Bai Shiuli, don't tell me that you don't want me to sleep with you. Her face turned red again, and she bit her lip. Yim Yulin, I don't. I think you want to have sex. He chuckled. You've been sticking to me today. Bai Shiuli's mind was in a mess. She wanted to cry, but no tears came out. Yim Yulin was the best of the best in the eyes of others. He was a good lawyer, and he was very proud of himself in the political circles. But in front of her, he was shameless and had a very wicked sense of humor. Every time, he was the one who wanted to do it, and he was the one who made her cry and beg for mercy, saying that she was a pervert, that she was lustful, and that she wanted his body. Bai Shiuli felt that her married life was perfect, except for that one thing. He was extremely perverted and shameless. In the end, he still got his way. It was clearly what he wanted. His stamina was abnormally good. Even though he said that he was very tired, he could still cling on to her without resting. Bai Shiuli almost wanted to cry, but he still didn't look satisfied. She had no choice but to shamelessly beg for mercy, saying that he was very powerful. So what? She would say whatever he wanted to hear now. Yim Yulin chuckled and nibbled on the tip of her nose as he whipped her. Are you satisfied? She nodded furiously. He smiled lazily and ended it hastily. He had finally let her off this time. After that, he went to take a shower. Bai Shiuli lay on the bed like a limp shrimp. She angrily thought to herself, how is he accompanying me? It's clearly me accompanying him. There are benefits to accompanying a secretary abroad. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. She bit the pillow. Yim Yulin came back from the shower and sat beside her. He patted her and said, I'm not going to shower. I don't want to. She bit the pillow and gave him an angry look. Her legs were so sore. How was she going to go shopping tomorrow? She wasn't naive enough to think that he would let her go today. Yim Yulin's style was to rest for a few hours and then come again. He was clearly the one who was lustful, but he had to make it seem like it was her every time. It was infuriating. He smiled. Be good and sleep. I have something to do. I'll accompany you when I come back. Chapter 3864. He smiled. I'm meeting a friend. Bai Shiuli didn't think much about it and let him go. She even felt sorry for him. But later, she found out that her husband climbed out of her bed and went to see Ai Wei. His first love, Lao Qing, was seen on the news. She packed her luggage and wanted to go back to China by herself. She was angry, no matter why he wanted to see Ai Wei. Yim Yulin didn't want to catch up with Ai Wei. It was business. But the moment he came back, he saw his rice worm packing her luggage and was about to leave. He pulled his tie and said helplessly, angry again, Bai Shiuli stepped on his foot. Let go of me. I want to divorce you, you bastard. He didn't care about her tricks and pushed the suitcase aside. He sat on the edge of the bed and reached out to pull her over. He carefully looked in her eyes. Did you cry? He sighed. You like to cry so much. She did not say anything and turned her head away. I have something to talk to her about. He sighed again and wiped the tears off her face. Don't cry. You're crying like a little monkey. She still did not want to talk to him. He smiled. I've done everything. If I really want to do something with her, I'll take anything. She finally looked up and glared at him. Shameless. He pulled her into his arms and said hoarsely, Shiuli, stop fooling around. Actually, at this moment, he was troubled while she was throwing a tantrum. But his heart was full and especially soft. She believed him. It was just a bit of a ritual to fool around. Yim Yulin kissed her nose. Don't cry, or I'll do it to you like before. You said you didn't. She sat in his arms and bit his Adam's apple. It was especially tempting. He chuckled and let her sit on his lap. He bit the tip of her nose, too. If you want it, I'll have it. No way. She wrapped her arms around his neck and stopped fooling around. I'm hungry. I want to eat. She was angry that he did not give her any food, even after teasing her for so long. He wanted to eat with AI way. The more she thought about it, the angrier she got. If she continued to bother with him, she would be a bastard. But after they got back together, every time they quarreled, they would reconcile after half an hour. There was no way they could quarrel for too long, because they had been lonely for too long. Asterisk on the other side, Yi Mubai slowly walked into the apartment. Wen Yuan was sitting there. He didn't say anything, just walked over and squatted down in front of her, hugging her gently. Wen Yuan didn't push him away. She lowered her eyes and looked at him. He didn't come back for the whole night. He didn't look as handsome as he usually did. Instead, he looked a little more miserable. He hugged her and said in a low voice, Wen Yuan, let's start over, okay? Wen Yuan placed her hand on his black hair gently. His body froze for a moment. She said softly, Yi Mubai, I can't even convince myself. Don't make things difficult for me, and don't make things difficult for yourself either. Isn't it good to be peaceful like this? She paused for a moment. If you feel that life is really boring and lonely, you can find some fun of your own. Really, I won't interfere. Just don't let Xiangnan see it. After she said that, he raised his head and stared at her. His gaze was a little unfamiliar, as though he had never seen her before. Slowly, he said, Wen Yuan, are you saying that you want me to have an affair? Chapter 3865. She didn't make a sound and just looked at him with an indulgent expression. Yi Mubai stared at her for about half a minute before he said softly, Wen Yuan, I really want to strangle you to death. At that moment, he wished so badly that he didn't have to worry about Xiangnan or the child in her belly. Their world was just the two of them. He could force her, use all sorts of methods to force her to accept and still love him. But he couldn't. He closed his eyes. Everything could be forced, but not feelings. When he opened his eyes again, there was a hint of disappointment in them. It was a very obvious disappointment. He slowly got up and stared at her for a long time before he took a step back and said in a low voice, You're right, but Wen Yuan, do you know that you've sentenced me to death, but it's a reprieve? The expression in his eyes was almost sorrowful. It was an expression that could only appear when one was tortured by feelings. But Wen Yuan didn't want to experience it anymore. After experiencing life and death, she didn't want to be a woman who loved someone else anymore. She wanted to be herself again. Yi Mubai went to the study and stood in front of the floor-to-ceiling window to smoke. In his heart, he knew very well that everything Wen Yuan did was to say goodbye to him, to divorce him, to draw a clear line between them. He lowered his eyes and smiled bitterly. Let go. He might have in the past, but not anymore. He remembered the pain in his heart when she was lying in the hospital. He never thought that he would feel pain for Wen Yuan. Those days, he forgot about Lin Cici's life and death. He didn't even care or ask about it. What he cared about was whether Wen Yuan would wake up and whether she would forgive him. He stood and smoked, thinking about that morning when she tugged at his sleeve and said that she wasn't feeling well. He thought that the despair in Wen Yuan's heart back then was as unforgiving as he was now. Yi Mubai looked at the gentle snow and thought about a lot of things. In the end, he didn't force her anymore. They resumed their previous life, which was also what she wanted, a lukewarm life. He treated her well, while she remained cold to him, but she did not throw a tantrum at him. This was actually a form of cold violence. She silently rejected all of his efforts. From then on, he did not do anything out of line. Even if there was something, he would solve it himself and not force her. Wen Yuan knew about it, but she didn't say anything. At night, she slept on her side. It was almost 11 o'clock when Yi Mubai came back from the study. He deliberately waited for her to fall asleep so that she wouldn't fall asleep in his arms. He knew she did not want him to hold her, but even if she did not want to, even if they were only in name, he wanted to hold her. One day, he thought, she would come around. One day, Yi Mubai took a shower in the guest room. When she crept into the room, Wen Yuan was already asleep. The bedside lamp was on, and there was a book beside her hand. He walked over and picked it up. He looked at it silently for a while. No matter what their relationship was, there was no way to erase the fact that she was a good mother. She did it not only for Xiangnan, but also for the child in her belly. Just like his brother said, Wen Yuan was a good woman. He looked at it silently, then pursed his lips and put the book on the bedside table. He lay behind her, his fingers silently stroking her belly. This was his entertainment every night. The child was about 7 months old. It could move and could feel him. Chapter 38:66. With just a touch, he felt her body stiffen. He knew that she wasn't asleep, so he said softly, Wen Yuan, can we talk? Talk about what? He thought that she wouldn't speak, but she did. Yimu Bai was a little happy. Then, he said in a hoarse voice, let's talk about the child's name, okay? She was the one who came up with Yi Xiangnan's name. As for the child in her belly, he wanted to name it himself. Wen Yuan was stunned for a moment. Then he seemed to be energized. You remember? He grunted and then moved his face over. In a low voice, he said, the boy will be called Yi Hui, and the girl will be called Yi Hui. Okay? Wen Yuan was silent for a long time before he said softly, pretty good. She said that she wanted to sleep, but he didn't want to let her sleep after talking to her for a while. He said in a hoarse voice, don't you want to know what it means? She was silent to save face for both parties. For Wen Yuan, there were some things that could not be reversed once they happened. After they got married, he gave her gifts and said all kinds of nice things to her. She really thought that they would be together forever. It was destroyed so quickly. She felt that she had not experienced the beauty of a relationship before she was ruthlessly pulled back to reality. She thought that would be great if they didn't love again. If they didn't love again, she wouldn't be so sad. She wouldn't be wondering why he ignored her discomfort that day and chose to look for Qin to save Lin Cece. She had entered some kind of spell and couldn't get out. Wen Yuan said, his voice a little faint in the dark, Yimu Bai, actually it's not important anymore. She turned in his arms and looked up at him. In the dark, no one could see each other's expressions. It was very safe. What's important? His voice was a little shaky. She shook her head. Nothing. Just as she was about to turn her back, he caught her again. Wen Yuan, don't tell me that your heart is still as water. You're not like this. His voice was really hoarse. If you insist on living like this, I can stay with you, but I won't divorce. After he finished speaking, he let go of her and stopped talking as if he was angry. Wen Yuan was stunned for a moment. Then he held onto his stomach and struggled to turn over. He still opened his eyes and gently helped her turn over. Then, he held onto the side of her body without letting go. She wanted to say something, but he continued in a hoarse voice, I won't let go. Wen Yuan. In the blink of an eye, Wen Yuan's belly became bigger and bigger. When she was 8 months pregnant, it was already difficult for her to walk. When she went to the prenatal checkup, it was difficult for her to get out of the car. Yimu Bai had to help her get in. After the examination, there was nothing wrong with the child. Because of the previous accident, the doctor told the pregnant woman that there must be someone by her side in the last month or so, because she could give birth prematurely at any time. Yimu Bai nodded. Wen Yuan looked at the doctor. I want to be hospitalized. The doctor smiled. There's really no need for that. It's still a long time, and the hospital is very stuffy. It's not good for the pregnant woman's mood. Wen Yuan's lips twitched, but he didn't say anything else. On the way back, Yimu Bai helped her into the car and fastened his seatbelt slowly. Then he looked at her and asked, What's wrong? Are you unhappy because you're not hospitalized? His voice was a little coaxing. The doctor said that being hospitalized is not good for the pregnant woman's mood. Wen Yuan looked down and turned her face away. It's fine if you don't want to stay. Let's drive. Bookmark for easier reading. Chapter 38:67. He doesn't start the car immediately. Instead, he looks at her sideways. Don't be afraid. I will always be with you. Nothing will happen. With that, he shakes her hand and starts the car. On the way home, no one said a word. He knew that that day was a shadow in Di Wenyuan's heart. She was afraid. His heart hurts a little, but he can't let her sink into it. One day, She has to understand that he is sincere to her and that they can be happy. Yi Mubai drives to the door of the apartment. When the car stops, she unfastens the seatbelt and wants to get out of the car. He grabs her hand and leans over to hug her. He doesn't say anything. He just holds her for about a minute and then lets go. His voice is a little hoarse. Don't move. I'll help you get out. When Yuan watches him get out of the car, walk around the front of the car, and open the door for her, she tilts her head and meets his eyes. Get out of the car. He holds her arm and leads her out of the car. He closes the door with one hand. When Yuan takes a nap after returning home, when she wakes up, she hears that Xiangnan is making noise. She blinks her eyes and immediately lifts the quilt to get up. However, she falls back again. Her body is so heavy that she can't get up at once. Her name is Mrs. Lin. It is Yi Mubai who comes over. He looks a little haggard, but he is still very gentle. What's wrong? He comes over and holds her down to stop her from moving. When Yuan looks at him, what's wrong with Xiangnan? Yi Mubai asks Mrs. Lin to go out first and then covers her with a quilt. When Yuan remembers that he is holding her down again, don't move. He pauses for a moment and then says Xiangnan has a little fever. It's 38 degrees Celsius. The doctor came. When Yuan is still worried. Do you want to go to the hospital? Let's keep an eye on him. Don't go if it's less than 38 degrees Celsius. It's not good for him. His voice is very gentle. Then he lowers his head and kisses her forehead. You sleep a little longer. I won't go out. Don't worry. With that, he gets up and goes out. When Yuan was half lying down, the master bedroom was quiet. She could vaguely hear his and Xiangnan's voices. Later, when Xiangnan stopped messing around, she was worried, so she struggled to get up and walked into the children's room. He gently pushed the door open and saw Xiangnan sitting on a small sofa in a cute little nightgown. Yi Mulin was reading a book to him. He was dressed very casually in gray casual pants and a gray sweater. Xiangnan was leaning against him with a cooling pad on his forehead, but his expression was very gentle. He was also looking at his father with great reliance. At this time, when Yuan realized that if she and Yi Mubai were to separate, the ones who would suffer the most would be Xiangnan and the child in her belly. He wanted to be a good husband and father. She could refuse, but she had no right to refuse on behalf of the child. This was somewhat unfair. When Yuan's fingers gently touched his lower abdomen as he pursed his lips, Yi Mubai looked up and saw her. He frowned. Why did you come out? Go back to the room and rest. When Yuan didn't understand, he said, Xiangnan has a cold. Do you want it to be contagious? When Yuan was stunned for a moment and looked at Xiangnan, Xiangnan's voice was crisp. I will be obedient, Mom. When Yuan smiled faintly and left, Yi Mubai looked at her back and felt a little excited. She hadn't smiled in front of him for a long time. Even in front of Xiangnan, as long as he was around, she would be very restrained. End of this chapter. Chapter 3868. Only God knew how much he wanted to hold her, how much he wanted to kiss the smile on her lips, and keep it. Yi Mubai's gaze was a little worried. Xiangnan pulled him back. Dad, you haven't finished. Yi Mubai snapped back to reality and continued to tell his son the story. He was a little excited, but he couldn't quite put it into words. He felt that when Yuan's attitude had changed a little. Although he was excited, he still patiently coaxed his son and took Xiangnan's temperature. It dropped to 37.5 degrees. He heaved a sigh of relief and ordered the kitchen to make porridge for Xiangnan when he woke up. This little guy hadn't eaten anything all day. After giving the instructions, Yi Mubai went to the study to deal with some matters. Recently, the box office of a movie he filmed was very popular. He didn't go to any of the events, but at least he had to pay attention to it sometimes. There were some occasions that required him to take some videos. There were also some company matters that he had to deal with. Suemo had helped him a lot. Another reason why he valued Suemo was that he was someone that when Yuan could accept. When Yi Mubai finished his work, it was already more than an hour later. When he got up, he was a little tired. He smoked in the study to relieve his fatigue and took a shower before returning to the master bedroom. When Yuan still got up and was reading in the living room, hearing his footsteps, she turned her head. How's Xiangnan? The fever has gone down a little. You should be fine. He closed the door of the master bedroom and walked towards her. After taking a shower, he was only wearing a black bathrobe. Even though it was just a simple bathrobe, it still accentuated his extremely good figure, especially with the loose collar. When Yuan could even see a few sturdy abdominal muscles, evenly distributed and shining with a seductive luster. She looked away, not wanting to look at him again, but he said in a hoarse voice, "You're willing to talk to me, aren't you?" "I don't know." Her voice was soft and hoarse. He was still looking up at her. His voice and posture were a little humble. "But you're willing to live with me, aren't you?" He was really a very smart man. She had only smiled slightly, but he could guess her thoughts and come over to tease her. When Yuan lowered his gaze, "Didn't you say that you wouldn't divorce me?" He placed his hand on her knee and said in a low voice, "When Yuan, there are many ways for a married couple to get along with each other. We probably had a particularly bad relationship in the past. What I'm trying to say is, let's change our way of getting along, okay?" He could temporarily not ask her to love him, but he was a normal man. If they continued like this, he did not know how long this marriage could last. Tormenting each other like that wouldn't be pleasant, and it wouldn't be good for the child either. When Yuan should understand that as well. She had refused to communicate with him before, but now he had to have a good talk with her. He wanted her to know that he didn't want to give up. It wasn't just that he didn't want a divorce. He wanted a lot more. When Yuan looked at him quietly and did not say anything, she didn't know how to answer, and she didn't know why he was so insistent. Wouldn't it be better to give birth to the child and then let go? He didn't like her that much, let alone love her. As for what he said, she could consider it, but she refused to discuss it with him in her heart. In her heart, she probably rejected him. Reject a man, no matter how good to her now, but once abandoned her for another woman. Chapter 3869. The discussion was fruitless, but he decided how they should interact. He was still very gentle with her, and when Yuan wasn't as cold as before. That night, he was very tired from taking care of Xiangnan. When he returned to the room, it was almost 11 o'clock. He sat by the bed and touched her face. "The fever has subsided. You're fine now." When Yuan turned her body sideways and was gently touched by him, she looked at him and asked softly, "Are you tired?" He replied vaguely, but he didn't go to take a shower. Instead, he leaned over and kissed her lips. He hadn't kissed her like this in a very long time, ever since she hated him. After kissing her, he was a little excited and couldn't control himself. It wasn't that he hadn't had women before, but this time was really different. When he kissed her, he felt the blood in his body boiling. Even though she was pregnant, he couldn't do anything at all. He just kissed her like this, almost intoxicated. After kissing her for a long time, he let go of her a little and pressed his forehead against hers. His voice was even more hoarse. "When Yuan, I'm very happy." "What are you happy about?" Her voice was as hoarse as his. He caressed her face delicately and slowly, as though he had a lifetime to do this. When Yuan buried her face in the white pillow. She wanted to hide, but he didn't let her. After what felt like a century, he finally retracted his hand and said hoarsely, "When Yuan, you know it in your heart." "I don't know," she said, sounding a little willful. Yi Mubai smiled and kissed her for a while. "Go to sleep. I'm going to take a shower and go see Xiangnan later." When Yuan looked at him and realized that he had lost a lot of weight. He had been taking care of her for the past few months, and now with Xiangnan, he couldn't get a good rest. She pursed her lips and said, "Go to sleep for a while. I'll set an alarm." Yi Mubai was stunned for a moment. He couldn't believe what he had heard. After a while, he laid down beside her softly, hugging her carefully and burying his face in her neck. He was indeed tired, but he couldn't bear to sleep while hugging her like this. He just hugged her like this, closing his eyes and smelling the fragrance of her hair. It was a good night's sleep. When Yi Mubai woke up, the sky was bright. The sunlight shone through the transparent window onto the big bed. It was very comfortable. His Adam's apple moved slightly. He reached out to block the sunlight and propped himself up. Xiangnan's voice rang in his ears. He was talking to Wen Yuan. Yi Mubai listened carefully. There was a charming smile on his handsome face, and the corners of his mouth were slightly raised. After a long time, he lifted the blanket, brushed his teeth, washed his face, and walked out. Xiangnan had already recovered. He looked at him happily and called him Daddy. Yimubai picked him up and kissed him. Dad, check if you're all right. He hugged Xiangnan and placed his hand on his forehead. It's not hot anymore. She then asked if Xiangnan had eaten breakfast. Xiangnan's voice was loud and clear. I ate with Mom. Yimubai put him down and went to the dining table. The servants served him breakfast. He drank a mouthful of milk and asked Wen Yuan calmly, Did you go see Xiangnan last night? Wen Yuan grunted. You didn't wake up. He smiled. Really? You didn't turn off the alarm clock? She didn't say anything. Perhaps she was still not used to talking to him like this. Yimubai didn't force her either. They were already very good like this. He was very satisfied. Chapter 3870. He was eating breakfast. Wen Yuan slowly walked to the French window and sat in front of the piano that he had bought for her. Her slender fingers landed on the keys. Yimubai looked at her and put down the breakfast in his hand. His eyes were a little hot. He knew what her actions meant. It meant that she would not leave him. His voice was hoarse. Wen Yuan, she hummed and said softly, I want to play a few songs. With that, she began to play the piano. She played very well. In his heart, she was much better than Lin Shui. He listened carefully. She played a few songs in a row, then stopped and said softly, Yimubai, I want to wait until the child is born and Xiangnan's condition has stabilized. Let's go back to City B. She paused for a moment and turned her head. Yimubai, I don't want to hide anymore. He looked at her quietly and said, Okay. Then he realized that Wen Yuan was a little different. As for what was different, he thought that this was probably the original Wen Yuan. She seemed to want to reconcile with him, but in fact, she had become more rational. Her feelings for him had changed from hatred to unwillingness to hate. It wasn't much better. However, her smile and the way she talked to him were especially precious to him. He couldn't bear to reject her. When Wen Yuan was no longer in a cold war with him, the days seemed to be especially warm, and there was a very beautiful feeling. Other than going out occasionally, Yimubai usually stayed at home to accompany her. Sometimes Wen Yuan would take a walk, do simple exercises, and sometimes play the piano. She was still born prematurely, but only 2 weeks early. The moment her water broke, she was stunned. Then, she reached out and grabbed Yimubai. Yimubai, I might be giving birth. It was nighttime. Yimubai woke up immediately. He sat up and held on to her. He shook his head and woke up 2 seconds later. His voice was calm. Don't be afraid. I'll take you to the hospital. Since the last time, the chauffeur at home had been on standby 24 hours. Suemo had also stayed over these few days. Everything was to deal with emergencies. Yimubai quickly put on his clothes and helped Wen Yuan put on a coat. His things were already packed. He woke up Suemo and 2 of his servants. 2 of them stayed to take care of Wen Yuan while he brought one of the servants with him to the hospital. She was in so much pain that she couldn't walk, so he had to carry her. After Wen Yuan became pregnant, she had grown to 120 centimeters. He carried her from home to the car, and then from the car to the delivery room of the hospital. He walked for a few hundred meters, and his arms were heavy and painful, but he didn't rest at all. The doctor and nurse pushed a trolley over. Yimubai carefully placed her on the trolley and ran with them. His fingers gently stroked her face, and he said in a low voice, Wen Yuan, don't be afraid. I'll always be here. She was in so much pain that her forehead was covered in sweat. He kissed her away, his heart aching. I'm right here. He asked to accompany the baby, and the doctor agreed. Yimubai changed her clothes and entered the delivery room. Wen Yuan was in so much pain that he bit his lips. His expression was very painful. He squatted down beside her and said in a low voice, Wen Yuan, scream if it hurts. Her hair was wet with sweat, and her face was a little pale from overexertion. Only now did he know that giving birth could be so painful. So, when she gave birth for the first time, he wasn't by her side. Did it hurt even more? He held her hand and placed it next to his face. Wen Yuan, I'm sorry. Her eyes were wide open, and she was panting heavily. Her whole body was stiff. Chapter 3871. The doctor and nurses kept encouraging and cheering her on. They even gave Wen Yuan a piece of chocolate. After enduring for 2 hours, Wen Yuan felt that she was about to run out of energy. She blinked and saw Mu Bai's face in front of her. She suddenly screamed in pain. All the pain, all the past, all the grievances were contained in that scream. He hugged her, and it was as if a surge of energy was injected into her body. Wen Yuan used all her strength, and finally, amidst the heart-wrenching pain, she heard the cry of a baby. Wen Yuan's heart relaxed, and she slowly lay flat. She was very, very tired. She wanted to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. The baby was still crying loudly. The doctor smiled and said, "What a healthy baby." It was so cute. After the doctor washed it, he couldn't help but pat the baby's butt. Mu Bai took a look and then leaned over to Wen Yuan's ear. He said in a low voice, "It's a little girl. Wen Yuan, we have a daughter." He was very happy to be a father, and his heart ached for Wen Yuan's pain. He kissed her when Wen Yuan woke up. The ward was bright. As it was a panoramic ward, the view was very good. The sun shone directly in, and it made the pregnant woman feel very relaxed. She was still in some pain and let out a low cry. Mu Bai immediately went forward and said in a hoarse voice, "You're awake. Do you want to drink some water and eat something? Wen Yuan, you've slept for almost 24 hours." She was still weak. She lay there quietly and looked at him. "Where's the child?" "She's asleep, lying on the little bed." Mu Bai's voice was soft, as if he was afraid to startle her or the child. Wen Yuan nodded and then watched as he went over and carefully pushed the little bed over. A beautiful little girl appeared in front of Wen Yuan. Although Wen Yuan had imagined what a child would look like, she was still very touched when she really appeared in front of her. She reached out and touched the little girl gently. The little girl frowned and looked like she was about to cry. Wen Yuan quickly retracted her hand and smiled. "She seems to have a bad temper." Mu Bai also moved back quietly and looked at the little fellow fondly. Then he came back. "Let me help you up. Can you sit down? The auntie just brought some soup over and fried some vegetables. I'm afraid you'll be too greasy and won't taste good." Wen Yuan nodded and sat up with his help. Mu Bai went to pour a glass of water. He sat beside her and let her head rest on his shoulder while he held the cup and fed her. Wen Yuan smelled the refreshing smell on his body. It smelled very good. She knew that he had taken a bath here. She looked at herself again. It was quite bad. Her hair should be very messy, and her body also smelled bad. A woman who had just given birth would not be much better. Her mind wandered and she choked. "What are you thinking about?" Mu Bai took a tissue and helped her wipe her face. "Aren't you thinking too much?" Wen Yuan glanced at him. Because he was too weak, he didn't even have the strength to argue. After he fed her water, he scooped a bowl of soup for her. It was very nourishing and not greasy. He fed her a bowl first, and then let her eat. As Wen Yuan ate, she looked at him. "I want to brush my teeth. Eat first. Brush after you're done," he said lightly. "I don't mind you." Wen Yuan, she didn't want him to feed her, but he insisted. In the end, he fed her and carried her to the bathroom. Chapter 3872. She had just given birth to a child, so she felt uncomfortable and disheveled. At this time, Wen Yuan missed the scene of giving birth in the past. It was inconvenient for Yi Mulin to take care of him, so he asked the nursing center to take care of him, and she didn't have to worry about being seen by others. She looked at him and said, "I want to take a bath." Mu Bai paused and stared at her in the mirror for a long time before saying softly, "It's been less than 24 hours. Let's wait another day. You're still very weak. If you're uncomfortable, I'll help you wipe it." "No need." She refused him. However, he still saw that she was uncomfortable. He pressed her to sit down and took a hot towel to wipe her carefully. From top to bottom, every inch of her body was changed by him. After he finished wiping, he carefully helped her tidy up her clothes and said softly, "I called Qin Shun to come and operate on Xiangnan. Xiangnan has been admitted to the hospital. After the examination, he is in good condition. We could take care of him in the hospital for a while." Wen Yuan looked at him with a blank gaze. Then she grabbed his sleeve and said bitterly, "Are you confident about the operation? His voice was very hoarse. "Don't worry. There will be no problem if Qinshin comes." Wen Yuan was relieved. He helped her back to the ward. Wen Yuan had been lying down for a day. She wanted to take a walk, so she went to see the newborn little guy. She held the railing and whispered, "Call her Yi Hui." He hugged her from behind and tightened his arms. She had just given birth, but her waist was a little slender. He took a deep breath in her neck and said nothing. He just hugged her. She had given birth to a child, but he felt like he had taken a walk through the gates of hell. After hugging for a long time, Yi Mubai whispered, "Wen Yuan, I won't let you give birth to another child in the future." He didn't want her to experience the heart-wrenching pain when she gave birth again. He wanted to have a vasectomy. And all of this, Yi Mubai hid it from Wen Yuan. He didn't want her to feel burdened. Later, he secretly went to have a vasectomy. In the afternoon, Xiangnan came to visit his sister with a face mask on. He lay by the side and looked at the fair baby, unable to tear his eyes away. After a long time, he reluctantly raised his eyes. "Sister, you're so beautiful." Wen Yuan smiled. "My sister's name is Yi Hui, the fennel fennel." Xiangnan nodded and stared blankly at the cutie until it was taken away by Qinshin. Qinshin handed Xiangnan over to Su Mo, and he came over to talk about the operation plan with Yi Mubai. Yi Mubai also talked very seriously with the world's best surgeon. He thought that he was very sincere, but Qinshin was not such a person. His medical skills were decent, but whether he was decent or not was another matter. After discussing the plan, Qinshin asked for an exorbitant sum of 7 figures for the operation fee. Usually, when he met a big sheep like Yi Mubai, Qinshin would never be polite. Otherwise, how could he guarantee the quality of her body and her life? Yi Mubai didn't care about this. He only wanted Xiangnan to be well. He knew that Qinshin was worth the price, because no matter how much money he had, Qinshin might not be willing to do the operation. In short, this was a doctor who knew how to enjoy himself. After talking about the business, Qinshin took the check from Yi Mubai's hand. When he saw that there were so many zeros in front of it, he flicked it and said, "The men of the Yi family are quite good. I'll give you a set meal." Yi Mubai wanted to refuse because his elder brother was miserably bullied by the set meal. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.